Joy Reid and Michelle Obama and Sheila Jackson Lee and Ketanji Brown Jackson were affirmative action picks, we would have been called the racist. But now they're coming out and they're saying it for us. They're coming out and they're saying, I'm only here because of affirmative action. Yeah, we know. You do not have the brain processing power to otherwise be taken really seriously. You had to go steal a white person's slot to go be taken somewhat seriously. Play cut 52.
But I rise today as a clear recipient of affirmative action, particularly in higher education. I may have been admitted on affirmative action, both in terms of being a woman and a woman of color, but I can declare that I did not graduate on affirmative action. This is my personal story.
I hear because of action affirmative. She can't even say that. We know. It's very obvious to us that you were not smart enough to be able to get in on your own. I couldn't make it on my own, so I needed to take opportunities from someone more deserving. You know, this is how arrogant Joy Reid and Ketanji Brown Jackson and Michelle Obama and Sheila Jackson Lee are. They're so narcissistic, they think this is persuasive. They think we're like, oh, of course, that's why we need affirmative action, because you have impressed us with your brilliance. Of course. Oh no, imagine the world without Joy Reid. Imagine the world without Sheila Jackson Lee or Michelle Obama or Ketanji Brown Jackson. They think this is persuasive. They think as they kind of now reveal that I'm only here because of anti-white, anti-Asian forced discrimination policies that turned me into a bitter, resentful activist that hates white people, honestly, through our policies.
Welcome to ViperTV Live. How's everybody out there in Radio Land? As you can see from our intro, we have some things to talk about right now. It's a whole lot of different things all at one time. We've reached a turning point, if you will, in America. And I've thought about it long and hard. And Charlie Kirk's death will not be met with my grief or my joy. I'll not waste energy on empathy that he himself refused to extend to others. Or will I find joy in a world that solves its problems with guns? I'll not lend myself to granting his martyrdom. Neither will I celebrate his death as if he himself is the problem that this nation has. Instead, I will simply lament the reality that manipulation of truth has become a lucrative tool for political and financial gain. And that rhetoric, like his, has shaped a culture of violence and division that leads to these events. Whether you are saying that you're torn up because he was a fighter, or you're breathing a sigh of relief because you're one of the groups that were attacked consistently by Charlie Kirk. You have the right to feel both ways. However, we don't need to resort to political violence. When a society no longer allows us to use our words, that's when we have officially devolved as a civilization. Now, a big problem I'm having with all this is we don't even know who the shooter is. But it seems so far that a lot of bad faith actors on the right have already tried to declare war on the entire left. We don't even know who the shooter is. And from what I'm seeing from the images so far is it's a white college age dude. And He was wearing a shirt with an American flag and a pistol on it, and I don't know. This happened yesterday during my live stream, and I said the words, live by the sword, die by the sword. And that, in my opinion, to give empathy is going against the philosophy that he preached. I'm merely honoring what he stood for. Black women do not have the processing power to be taken seriously. You have to go steal a white person's slot. Charlie Kirk. I can't stand the word empathy. I think empathy is a made-up, new age term, and it does a lot of damage. Charlie Kirk. We made a huge mistake when we passed the Civil Rights Act in the 1960s. Charlie Kirk. MLK was awful. He's not a good person. Charlie Kirk. If I see a black pilot, I'm going to be like, boy, I hope he's qualified. Charlie Kirk. LGBTQ is a social contagion. Charlie Kirk. Now, it seems as though a lot of people so far that I know and I'm friends with have been attacked by that. We need armed militias to prevent the diminishing and decreasing of white demographics. Charlie Kirk. The problem is that we're getting lumped in as an enemy of the state being the left when the shooter hasn't even been identified. And if we was to follow patterns, it's Trump supporters that are the shooters. So, with that being said, there's a channel that I really like called Into the Fray. And this gentleman right here, he really, really captured a lot of what I was thinking. And I'm sure that we can come to some kind of consensus. Because if right now you are sad, you weren't one of the groups that was on the end of his rhetoric.
My dear, beloved cousin Charlie Kirk has been prematurely shuffled off his mortal coil by an assassin's bullet. I spent 4 hours today covering the situation as it unfolded on a special impromptu edition of Onion Nuggets, which I will link down below. But I find that I have more to say than I said there. Let me start by saying that I detest the sheer amount of right-wingers currently spewing vitriol and threats at the left when it is not entirely clear as of this moment, when I write these words, that anyone from the left had anything to do with this act of political violence. People like Laura Loomer, who tweeted, "It's time for the Trump administration to shut down, defund, and prosecute every single leftist organization. If Charlie Kirk dies from his injuries, his life cannot be in vain. We must shut these lunatic leftists down once and for all. The left is a national security threat." Or like Elon Musk, who said, "The left is the party of murder, which is not only dangerous but stupid. The left is not a party. The left doesn't even have a party in this country." Or this guy, whoever the fuck he is.
Exactly what he just said. I mean, A, the left doesn't have a party in this country. We are so absolutely disorganized. But also, the ability for the right to be able to just punch and punch and punch and punch down and then act like they're the victims when any of us clap back. Now, I'm not talking about with what the incident that just happened. Like, I mean, Nancy Mace, there's a great example. She was confronted about town halls, melted down. There's a problem where the bully coward victim mentality is running rampant right now. Like I said, the shooter hasn't even been identified. And even like talking heads like Jesse Waters have declared war on the left. What does that mean? Anybody that's not wearing a fucking MAGA hat?
This video's in regards to Charlie Kirk. And this video's for the fucking liberals. It's war, motherfuckers. We're coming for you. We're coming for you. And spare me your fucking self-righteous bullshit lectures. I don't give a fuck. We're coming for you.
Let's be clear. At this juncture, there is absolutely no evidence that the shooter was a leftist or a liberal. There existed extreme animosity between Nick Fuentes and his Groyper army and Charlie Kirk and his Turning Point USA. Though it's worth noting that Nick made sure to pay tribute at the altar of Kirk today. There are certainly other factions on the right who viewed Charlie Kirk negatively as well. And lest we forget, the would-be Trump assassin turned out to be a registered Republican, not some radical leftist stormtrooper.
So that is correct. And another thing is, from what I've observed, is the right already has their narrative where if it comes out that this person is a registered Republican, because they can just say that they registered so they could vote for Nikki Haley. So no matter what, they have their Horst Wessel. Now, what's that? We'll get into that eventually. My big problem that I'm having is that there is this ability to just lie flat out on the right. Just lie like a spread gun of lies. And the moment that you try to push back with any truth, it's dismissed unless it fits the narrative. That's the big fucking problem that I'm having when it comes to all that. Because, as you can see right here, I'll rewind this just a little bit.
It's on the right who viewed Charlie Kirk negatively as well. And lest we forget.
Okay. Now, there are Groypers who have problems with Charlie Kirk. Now, it's well known that there's a certain faction on the right that are firearms enthusiasts. I still don't know once more if this shooter is left or right. I'm just going by history. They're well known to be firearms enthusiasts. So unless this was like a straight up professional job, straight up, then you need to think about the fact that this was over 200 meters away. It was one shot right to the neck. And they had a quick escape route. And there was a patsy for them to get a hold of while the other escaped. So we need to cool our jets as to start all of our different little conspiracy theories that we're having as to who this person is. But that doesn't mean that you get to use that space because they haven't caught him yet. The FBI caught the wrong person because they're incompetent. But you don't get to use that space to flood the zone with lies because that's going to start causing violence. Whether you want it to or not, it's going to. Stochastic terror is an amazing thing when it comes to situations like this. So, as Into the Fray is saying, if you feel a certain way, you're allowed to feel that way, especially if you're one of the groups that were consistently attacked.
The would-be Trump assassin turned out to be a registered Republican, not some radical leftist stormtrooper. Reality is often more complicated than reactionary morons attempt to portray it. It is also possible that the motives of the shooter are entirely apolitical, such as when John Hinckley Jr. shot Ronald Reagan to impress Jodie Foster.
I think that is something that we completely discount too, is that there's people that have access to firearms they just have a screw loose and they want to be known forever in the history books. And I hate to say it, but the person who did this crime, well, unfortunately, their names are going to be in the book. I mean, his name's going to be in the books. And this inspires other people who want to make a name for themselves. And I'm tired of consistently hearing about mental health being an issue when we defund mental health to give billionaires tax breaks.
Back in 1981, Hinckley was not trying to bring down Reaganism or topple the GOP or signal allegiance to any political movement. He was trying to get the attention of an actress. The most powerful man on earth was nearly killed because a deeply disturbed guy wanted to impress a woman who didn't even know him. The motives of violent people often lack the neat ideological coherence that commentators love to paste over them. That all being said, it is, of course, entirely possible that Kirk was targeted by a left-wing extremist. But that possibility does not justify the rush to hang this crime like a scalp on the belt of the American left before Kirk's body is even cold. If the assassin turns out to be politically motivated, then the facts should speak for themselves. But until then, what we're witnessing is nothing more than naked political opportunism. Another line of rhetoric to emerge from the chaos of today's events is this lie of Charlie Kirk, the moderate. Charlie Kirk may not have been the fringiest of the fringe, but
Oh, shit, I didn't even realize that my microphone was muted. Sorry about that. I was taking a drink of my tea, and I didn't want to mukbang you. I was just saying is, don't let this whole moderate narrative go through. Charlie Kirk was not a moderate. He was a bigot. He was a misogynist. He was a homophobe. And he made millions off of doing it. Millions off of radicalizing young men and some young women to despise their fellow American just because they are not the same skin color and religion. So that's not a fucking moderate. Stop saying that. What I was saying is, before I realized the microphone was cut off, is in some of the dark spaces, they were saying if they can take him out, it's always they, a global conspiracy, they. But if they can take him out, imagine what they would do to somebody who's not as moderate as the people on this stream. Charlie Kirk's not a moderate. And, you know, seriously, reapeth, soweth. Soweth, reapeth. It's continually cyclical. What you put out is what you get back. And when you're somebody who's trying to instill the idea that empathy is bad, just because you want to be able to get a crop of minds to accept racism, because if you're empathetic, you don't think that way. You tend to put others before you. You tend to put yourself in other people's shoes. It's harder to be racist. It's hard to be bigot when you're empathetic. So for that being known as a sin, according to Charlie Kirk's version of Christianity, these things come back to you. Words don't go away. They only collect interest.
Moderates don't condone stoning gay people to death, as Charlie does in the following clip.
Is in Leviticus 18 is that thou shalt lay with another man shall be stoned to death. Just saying. So, Miss Rachel, you quote Leviticus 19, love your neighbor as yourself. The chapter before affirms God's perfect law when it comes to sexual matter.
Now, I am being told, as a bisexual man with LGBT friends and family members, that I am a bad person for not more.
As somebody of the exact same persuasion as this gentleman said, I'm tired of people thinking that my life can be dictated by fairy tales, especially when they're fairy tales that are politically convenient lies when they want them to be. The reason that the First Amendment exists, not the freedom of speech part, the other part, about making no established religion. That's why it's so essential to that part of the Constitution. That's why the Constitution was written during the Enlightenment. As we got away from theocracy.
Mourning the death of a man who used his platform to push for the death of myself, of my friends, of my family, as a matter of public policy. Charlie Kirk thought women and girls should be forced to carry their rapist baby to term. He supported the brutal Israeli genocide in Gaza so strongly that Netanyahu himself publicly mourned his passing. I won't even get into his hatred of trans people, black people, immigrants, and so forth, because I'd be here all night throwing citations at you. Charlie Kirk was not a moderate. He was not compassionate or kind. And despite what the revisionists would have you believe, he did not value open dialogue.
I completely agree with that. Look at MSNBC and CNN right now. They're painting him as though he was some asset to society just because he was a victim of political violence, whereas the right hasn't said a damn thing about Representative Hortman. Trump never lowered the flag the way he's doing for Kirk. He even blamed it on Tim Walz. And this is my problem, is we're expected to just get punched in the face over and over and over and just take it. Because the moment that we call anything out, then we're divisive. Then we're fueling political rhetoric. when we're merely pointing out the truth. But the whole bully, coward, victim dogma makes it so that nuance, it doesn't exist. You have to think in mob mentality. Once the pitchforks are out and the torches are going, you're not going to change their mind.
He valued carefully cultivated confrontations with soft targets that he could easily edit to fit his narrative. He valued lazy, gotcha politics, infotainment slop designed to pump up right-wingers who exist in the gravitational pull of his hug box. I've noticed a great many left and lib commentators and politicians spewing this repulsive line today. This line of, I may not have agreed with Charlie Kirk, but blah, blah, blah. And I want to let you know that you will absolutely not hear that soulless drivel pouring forth from my mouth. Especially not for a man who believed this about gun violence.
So we need to be very clear that you're not going to get gun deaths to zero. It will not happen.
Right.
You can significantly reduce them through having more fathers in the home,
Yes.
by having more armed guards in front of schools. We should have an honest and clear reductionist view of gun violence, but we should not have a utopian one. You will never live in a society when you have an armed citizenry and you won't have a single gun death. That is nonsense. It's drivel.
Wow.
But I think it's worth it. I think it's worth to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year, so that we can have the Second Amendment to protect our other God-given rights. That is a prudent deal. It is rational. Nobody talks like this. They live in a complete alternate universe.
True.
As far as I'm concerned, Charlie himself viewed his own grisly demise as nothing more than the price of freedom. It's worth noting, by the way.
I mean, those were his words. Don't get mad when we're just displaying his words. Just like when he said that we need to ensure that victims of mass shooters don't dominate the news cycle. Those are his words, not mine. But yet he can be elevated to this reason, as we're about to get into, for the right to go ahead and basically say it's time to boogaloo when we don't even know the identity of the shooter. And it's looking more and more like it might not be who they think it is.
That these right-wing ghouls who are trying to make you feel bad for Charlie Kirk because he had children spent the entire day ignoring the actual school shooting that happened in Colorado. Just as they have ignored or hand-waved away every school shooting that has happened in this country since I was a school kid myself.
That's 100% point, because you had to research to learn about that school shooting. It didn't even come up in the news at all. And that tells us that it's normalized at this point. And that's a damn shame. But every time that we've ever mentioned anything, there's always mental health or thoughts and prayers.
I'm not going to spend much more time on this video. I spoke about this event at length earlier today. Let me just summarize my feelings thusly. I will not waste empathy on a person who reviled empathy.
I can't stand the word empathy, actually. I think empathy is a made-up New Age term that does a lot of damage.
I will not cry for the shooting death of a person who dismissed the shooting deaths of others. I will not mourn the concept of a moderate who never existed. I will not cry at the grave of a person who wanted me and people I love dead. And I will not pretend for a single second that I view what happened today as a tragedy. And I will not feed you some empty platitude about how I condemn political violence as I read countless tweets from right-wingers who are threatening leftists with political violence as we speak. I will conclude this by saying, if you find the events of today surprising in any way, then you must be utterly devoid of any sense of connection with the zeitgeist of this nation. What happened today is not an aberration. It is the logical culmination of the trajectory we've been on for decades. America is a pressure cooker, sealed tight, rattling, and hissing. And every so often, the steam bursts out in the form of bullets and blood. We live in a culture where violence is fetishized, where political rhetoric is militarized, where owning your enemies is worth more than understanding your neighbors. To be shocked by this is to admit you've been sleepwalking through the unraveling of our civic fabric. Charlie Kirk did not cause that unraveling, but he certainly profited from it. He stoked it, cultivated it, and branded it patriotism. He helped raise an army of kids whose political education consisted of heckling the libs and cheering cruelty as strength. To call his death surprising would be to call fire surprising in a room full of oily rags and open flames. So no, I will not offer contrived mourning, nor will I feign horror that one of the architects of this climate was consumed by it. If you want to call it a tragedy, then call it what it truly is. Not the tragedy of Charlie Kirk, but the tragedy of a nation that has come to make this inevitable.
That's 100% correct. He has been part of the architecture that allowed this to happen. Nobody wants this to happen. But the reason that it is happening is because there is folks like him who decided that they needed to, well, use that division to not only create political power, but to enrich himself as well. And America has a long history of people using fascism to enrich themselves, or fascist rhetoric, namely Father Charles Coughlin. All right, so like I said, pretty much they've said that they've openly declared war on the left, whatever that means. I guess until the Lipitor runs out. Y'all go Civil War. I'll be there after my stories. You know what I mean? Like, okay, cool. I got it. But it doesn't mean that they're not going to use it to doing some picked up shit when it comes to legislation. What do I mean by that? Well, I want to go ahead and call this is the excuse they wanted, and then we're going to talk about it on the other end.
On June 28th of 1914, Gavrilo Princip murdered the then Archduke of Austria-Hungary named Franz Ferdinand. Within a month, by July 28th, Austria-Hungary had declared war on Bosnia because they wouldn't accept all of their terms. This set off a chain reaction of alliances that eventually led to World War I. Do you notice how, even though we do not have a suspect in custody for Charlie Kirk, we do not have a motive, they are already blaming the radical left and saying, to quote Laura Loomer, that we should use the power of the state to exterminate the left. They are already declaring war even though there is no suspect. This is the excuse that they've been waiting for. before. This is the response they were hoping to get by Trump's faked assassination attempt, and now that Charlie Kirk is dead, they will weaponize this to use the military, the National Guard, statewide force, and censorship against anyone who does not agree with them. They have been waiting for this moment, and it does not matter what the truth is, they will not accept it, because they want to paint the left as the violent group, even though we're not the ones that committed the insurrection on January 6th, erected a gallows for Mike Pence when he wouldn't do what they wanted him to do. And also the same group of people that said last year, according to Stephen Miller, that the Second American Revolution will remain bloodless if the left allows it. It doesn't matter who did this, or conveniently that it was done the day before September 11th so they can paint it as terrorism. And the same right-wingers that are losing their fucking shit over this right now. And
Exactly. That's actually a great point. Happened right before 9/11. So you can have 48 hours of, I guess, anti-quote-unquote terrorism rallies. It's, like I said, I don't know what the political leaning of the assassin is, but no matter what, we have to ensure that, like, this just doesn't become normal. There was thousands of people in Charlie Kirk's crowd who watched that happen, and either that radicalized them right there, or it certainly traumatized them. Nobody wants to see that. The people who weren't expecting to see it on the internet, all of a sudden they click on a button and holy living fuck. And, you know, we see AI violence, we see video game violence, we see violence in movies, special effects. But it's different when it's real, and when, from what I've seen, it's extremely calculated.
how dare you, and how dare you not be sympathetic to this person who was actively promoting harm? They are the same people who did not say a word when Melissa Hortman and her husband were assassinated in their home by someone who impersonated an officer, had a manifesto about murdering Democratic representatives, had stalked these people, and
I'm pretty sure that whole him having a manifesto of Democratic operatives, that was meant to set off some kind of boogaloo. I think there's been several events that are supposed to be the one that really just kicks everything off. So they also, I mean, the birthday book was being exposed just yesterday during all this. The Republicans voted, for the fourth time, voted down releasing the Epstein files. So, as we do know that the media cycle is one to capitalize on our distraction, we have to ensure that that doesn't happen.
had essentially an expose on them in his car and in his home. They didn't say a word. No flags at half-mast, no thoughts and prayers, no we need to do something about this, there's no space for political violence, none of that, because it doesn't matter. The double standard is clear, the hypocrisy is clear. They will balk at the, oh, how dare you? They didn't say a word when Melissa Hortman was killed. They don't actually care about this. They care about using it as a weapon to silence people who oppose them. And it is a great way to reunify a group that was fracturing over not releasing the Epstein files. And again, right before September 11th, you get to paint it as terrorism, and now you get to use emergency military powers to go after people you don't like. This will escalate violence faster than anything we've seen since January 20th up to this point. And it happened right in front of all of those young white kids who are now ripe to be weaponized.
Exactly what she just said. Now, this is the most important thing when it comes to this situation in the aftermath. And honestly, I said this name before, but if we're really, really going to get into it, let's get into it. It's time for Twisted History.
It is not heresy, and I will not recant.
Go to Skip Franz Jr.
Ooh. It's good times. So, what do I mean What are we studying on Twisted History today? Well, gang, you've heard me mention the name Horst Wessel. Now, Horst Wessel, it's very, very important because as the Being Liberal Substack, it's a great place of information. I kind of grabbed some notes from there, and it's when tragedy becomes theater, don't let them Horst Wessel Charlie Kirk is the name of the article. Now, what she's saying is that this warning isn't about equivalence, it's a tactic. Authoritarians, they turn death into myth and grief into mobilization. They're experts at turning funerals into furnaces. Resist the myth-making. One of my favorite examples of this is, do you remember in Tombstone? Do you remember when after the OK Corral fight, which was started by the bad guys, they paraded them through town and said, "Gun down," and the streets, Tombstone. It's the idea that you can be as big a bastard as you want, but the moment that any repercussion happens because of the environment that you cultivate, then you get to basically use this as some kind of mythology. What do I mean by that? Well, it just happened in Utah, Charlie Kirk. Well, I mean, you were shot during a campus event, another school shooting. This is the only school shooting I've ever seen Republicans honestly give a shit about. I'm just calling it like I see it. But according to multiple outlets and Trump's public statement, the details are still shifting. The thing that bothers me is that if you look at Barack Obama's tweet, he said, "We don't yet know what motivated the person who shot and killed Charlie Kirk, but this kind of despicable violence has no place in our democracy. Michelle and I will be praying for Charlie's family tonight, especially his wife Erica and their 2 young children." Now, all I've seen from the left is nothing but condolences and humanity, in the same way that we also gave to Ted Cruz, which we did not get back. But this is the thing. Condemning violence full stop is something that we have to do. There's people that make their money from doing it, from stoking it, but that doesn't mean that we have to encourage it. Once again, we have to learn from history. And the warning isn't about equivalence, it's about a tactic. Because in 1930, the Nazis turned Horst Wessel, Horst Wessel, a junior SA man, Sturmabteilung, the brown shirts, who died after being shot, into a political saint. Now, Joseph Goebbels mythologized him, elevated his poem into the Horst Wessel line, and used ritual music and the radio, which was the mass medium of the era, to fuse the grief with mobilization. It worked for a time because martyr stories short-circuit our critical facilities. They short-circuit our critical faculties. They short-circuit our ability to use nuance. How did the Nazis use Horst Wessel as a template? Well, they took this personal tragedy and made it into a public myth. The private grief was commandeered for a mass movement. A song and a story about him as well. I mean, his poem became a national anthem of belonging. Repetition created devotion. We know how that goes. What large group doesn't enjoy its group repetition? Lock her up. I'll leave that there. I always said that pep rallies were just preparation for nationalism anyway. You can disagree with me if you want. But the ritualization, vigils, pageantry, press-saturated public sphere with emotionally available symbolism, and enemy fixation, the story always pointed to a collective foe, justifying harsher measures Does any of this sound familiar? Do you see why I'm bringing up Horst Wessel? Now, here's the thing with our modern American remix of it, I suppose. This is a caution, not a direct comparison of regimes, but the propaganda logic is extremely potable. Watch for these moves in the coming days, gang. Instant sanctification by the leader. Trump's eulogy posts are already defining the frame. Expect beloved youth leader narratives to harden fast. Rituals that migrate into rallies, prayer vigils, memorial stages, and campus ceremonies that morph into campaign content. That was the point of Wessel's pageantry, you see. Attribution before evidence. Premature claims about culprits, political enemies, media, the left, immigrants, all to fix blame and demand escalation. Policy ratchet tied to grief. Calls for emergency powers, which we all know once emergency powers are granted, rarely are they ungranted. Campus purges, surveillance expansions, or exception laws sold as the price of safety. Classic use of fear and mourning combined. And of course, especially with this one, merchandising the memory. Hashtags and pins and t-shirts and endless clip loops that transform loss into evergreen engagement and fundraising. The medium has changed, the method hasn't. So what do we have to do as a pro-democracy coalition? Well, we got to use our brains. We need to realize that it's not a bad thing to take advantage of the fact that you have a Second Amendment right while you still do. And keep it on you. I don't know how weird it's going to get, but there's no reason to not have a right to defend yourself, especially when you basically had a target painted on your back. So, check it out. We have to lead with human decency. Dude was 31. We get that. Political murder is anti-American. It is. Ballots, not bullets. We need to separate tribute from policy by compassion first, legislation second. Resist grief-shaming arguments that can say, any policy debate equals disrespect. That's how propaganda corrals you. Insist on facts. We need to share verified updates from reputable outlets. If it's not confirmed, don't amplify it, gang. Errant details and first hours are common. Hold them lightly. Reject collective blame. Oppose the rhetoric that the left made this happen. We don't even know anything about the shooter and his motivations. Collective guilt is the gateway drug to collective punishment, the authoritarian tell. Just like the idea of authoritarian fragility, which is what they use whenever you give any sort of pushback, like what happened in LA when they sent the National Guard in for extreme measures. That term is authoritarian fragility. It's where they take dissent and they weaponize it and make it illegal to dissent. De-weaponize the frame. Avoid language of war and extermination. We should be neighbors, damn it, not enemies. Authoritarians thrive when politics sounds like battlefield prep. Listen to what Steve Bannon is saying right now. And platform health, not heat. Let's encourage campuses, media, and civic groups to host plural, non-performative forums. Once the facts are clearer, in places where doubt is allowed and de-escalation is the goal. That's the most important thing, because the methods that were used to turn Horst Wessel into a saint are being applied just as we speak. If there's one thing that we know, it's the Fashkant original. And I think that the more that we know about our history and where it comes from, the better. Now, we're going to get a channel that I love called Advice from Lewis. We're going to give them a little love because he feels the same way that we're all feeling right now. Let's check it out.
Kirk was shot and killed today at a university in Utah, one of his usual debates. Seconds before this, they were discussing the Minnesota shooter, and he was saying that trans people are violent. In another video, Charlie Kirk said that gun deaths are necessary in America if it means we can keep our Second Amendment rights. He said they're prudent, necessary, and he's okay with gun deaths as long as we get to keep our guns. He even touched on school shootings and said just give them some armed guards.
So we need to be very clear that you're not going to get gun deaths to zero. It will not happen. Right. You can significantly reduce them through having more fathers in the home, yes, by having more armed guards in front of schools. Yes. We should have an honest and clear reductionist view of gun violence, but we should not have a utopian one. You will never live in a society when you have an armed citizenry and you won't have a single gun death. That is nonsense. It's drivel. But I think it's worth it. I think it's worth to have a cost of, unfortunately, some gun deaths every single year, so that we can have the Second Amendment to protect our other God-given rights. That is a prudent deal. It is rational. Nobody talks like this. They live in a complete alternate universe.
I want to iterate that we are forced to live in a society by people with this ideology. This is such a chaotic way of thinking and living. However, I do not wish for death or advocate for death on anybody. I just find it insane how you can spread so much hate to a community that people are rejoicing on the internet. There's people celebrating, truly feeling like their nightmare is over because he has hurt them so much with his words. There's people that feel like he's been spreading hateful rhetoric, misogyny, discrimination, homophobia, among many other things. We used to have a society where everybody was empathetic and had the ideology that nobody deserves to die no matter what happens. However, we've been forced into a society by a certain group of people that want to live this way. And the empathetic people have tried. They've tried to convert these people. They've tried to reason, understand, meet in the middle, but these people do not want to meet in the middle. They want you to meet.
Not just that, it's you try to show them facts as well. I mean, what were we just talking about with the farmers? How many times do we try to warn them that these policies are going to destroy you, but they just didn't want to hear it? And it's the same thing what Lewis is saying right now.
Meet them on their very, very right side. Charlie Kirk was one of them. Here's what he had to say about empathy.
I can't stand the word empathy, actually. I think empathy is a made-up New Age term that it does a lot of damage, but I can't stand the word empathy.
He's chosen his ideology and wants to live by these ideologies. He doesn't want your empathy. He doesn't want guns to be banned. He thinks gun deaths are necessary. It's just crazy how these things come full circle at times. It's like you actually speak these things into existence. I just don't understand how you can advocate for things that you know is openly hurting large groups of people, and because it's not happening to you or you feel like you benefit from it, you just don't care what's happening to these other people because you got to gain something. I mean, these have to be people that have never experienced true pain in their life. I truly believe that the most giving and kind people have experienced excruciating amounts of pain, and they know what it's like on that other end, and they don't want anybody to be.
You know, I completely agree with him. Some of the nicest people I know have lived the hardest lives. I'm friends with a lot of them. You know, I mean, Island of Misfit Toys, you know what I mean? And when I think of people like Charlie Kirk or Donald Trump or Ben Shapiro, I think of people that never really punched a time clock. I think of people that never changed a box of soda in the back of a restaurant. I see somebody who had to miss an extremely important family holiday because they had to work. So when I see people who have the problem with empathy, I think a big thing is because there's two things here, and I'm gonna keep it a buck. I think a lot of dudes have problems with empathy because we're not downloaded with that information. You know what I mean? Like, we weren't created, and we didn't have that software, because we're always kind of taught about the whole, like, you be strong and silent and take it like a man kind of thing. And what ends up happening is you develop narcissism because you're the only person you can rely on. The only person that generally wants to hear you, you know, a man's problems from what, you know, society says these days, you know, is a exotic dancer if you're paying her. Now, it's an extremely toxic mindset, and unfortunately, it's like that whole John Wayne mindset. It's permeated over and over and over. And this creates narcissism. And what happens with narcissism is you completely remove empathy. Empathy is the literal cure for narcissism. It's putting yourself in somebody else's shoes. But what ends up happening is that these people who have never had to deal with that kind of difficulty or that kind of struggle, the idea of putting themselves in somebody else's shoes doesn't exist, because they don't have that experience to draw off of, in the same way that if you know, have a fucked up home life at home, and then you go to school, and then you meet a friend, and then you go over to their house, and their home life's not like that at all, you're like, whoa, 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 whoa. What the fuck's going on here? But before that, all you knew was your environment, and you thought that was normal.
Be on that other end. However, there's many people that aren't like that. They haven't gone through actual challenges in life. The only challenge they've ever had is their self-inflicted hate that they spread on to other people. This is what a very large portion of America remembers Charlie Kirk as. Charlie Kirk is a racist, homophobic, misogynistic Zionist who doesn't care for the lives of black people, POC, LGBTQ women, and immigrants. We're not here to play sympathizer for a fascist who couldn't care less about anyone else who's not white and rich. I mean, this is the same person that called people of color and women pilots all DEI hires, to include the fire chief, and said how many little girls died at Camp Mystic because the Austin Fire Department hired a DEI fire chief. I looked up Charlie Kirk to find his Twitter profile and found that I couldn't find it, and it turns out I blocked him like a year ago because I got tired of seeing his racism, homophobia, misogyny, lies, spreading this hateful rhetoric, making people scared for no reason. I blocked him. I thought Elon Musk was hiding his profile. No, I blocked him. Let's see if he's still on my block list. Found him. Scrolling down his page is making me very angry, actually, and I remember why I blocked him, and I'm actually going to block his account again because he seems to be very, very obsessed with black people on this page, and I just don't understand the obsession, but this is exactly why people are spreading and don't seem to care, because he was harmful to many communities in America. And it's sad to say, the fact of the matter is he was not a good person, right? I scroll down, I see him talking about criminal illegals. Why are we putting up with this? This is what I'm talking. He just spreads hateful rhetoric about these communities rather than just speaking on a specific individual.
And right there, that was him denying that was Trump's signature on the birthday card. He was also complicit in the CSAM ring.
Individual situation. He tries to speak to the scared racist people because that's his fan base that made him rich, and then he relies on me and you to react to it, to get angry about it, and when we get angry about it, we want to defend it, and that's his whole shtick, right? So if you did not know who he was, that is who he was. I have a lot more I could say about this matter, and I'm going to say it. It's sad that our community's gotten to the point that millions of people can be happy over the death of somebody. It's sad that one person can cause so much harm to millions of people that they're happy that person's no longer with them and can no longer hurt hurt their community. Having empathy sets you up for more failure in America. So the empathy wave is over. It's every man for themselves now. Racist America has brought us to the state of this country and is why our communities are so divided and why everybody seems to hate each other. However, there's only one group of people spreading this hateful rhetoric and holding on to it. Why? Because they make money off of it. They make money off of dumb, uneducated Americans who do not take 2 seconds to look into anything they have to say. They take it completely at face value. And then you...
Right there. He couldn't have said it better. People hear what it is that they want to hear, especially when it confirms biases that they already have, and they're glad to pay money to do it. Nothing, I mean, I literally saw a stream where they took super chats about what just happened and took money all night. And it was not a small amount of money that this person made. So there is grift in being what is considered a Christian nowadays when you don't actually have to do anything that the church says. You can give it lip service and say that you do, but when it comes down to the actual teachings of Jesus, you know, you say it's too woke and it's the Old Testament God that you're into. Just move the goalposts until you get the excuse that you need for a boogaloo. And now, without even knowing who the shooter is, you're already... I don't know. I don't want to talk directly to the right wing, but sometimes it feels like I have to, because I can see the playbook. We're not dumb. We're not stupid. We study history. We see exactly what's going on. We see that this is probably going to be used as a preface for martial law so that we don't get to have elections in 2026, because it was looking bad for Republicans. And I want to see bipartisanship, but when I realize that there's an entire sect of media that has no interest in making us a better country, then it's really hard to grant them that nuance.
Me and whoever else live in a constant state of stress around these people. And what do you think that does to your nervous system? What do you think that does to your health? You're not out here making anybody feel that way, but they're purposely with intent doing it to you. They're purposely lying to other people about you because your fear and everybody else's fear gets them paid. Your hate and everybody else's hate keeps attention on them and it gets them paid. Imagine being born the way you were born and then somebody takes stage to try to convince the rest of America that anybody born like you is an awful person. Be scared of them, hate them, treat them terribly, don't allow them to have the same services you have. And then at the same time they tell you you are not receiving racism. There's nothing bad happening to you. It's all in your head. They're gaslighting you after causing you the state of fear you have to live in for your own life. And that's why I feel like so many people online seem to have been extremely relieved that that nightmare for them is over. And I can't blame them. I do not advocate for anybody's death, and I don't think this should happen to anybody. But when I sit in the middle and I look at it objectively, I understand. I always do my best to try to understand both sides of things. And maybe that's my empathy speaking. And if more people tried to understand both sides, we would have a society again. But unfortunately, only one group of people wants to understand both sides. The other person just wants their side, and they're very wrong all the time. I do hope one day this savage civilization we live in comes to an end and we go back to the pre-Trump days. Every time Trump takes hold in this country, violence shoots through the roof. And
I completely agree. I was doing a game stream yesterday, and in the middle of me giving a detailed history lesson about the hot gates of Thermopylae and the legend of 300 and Leonidas taking on Xerxes and the Persian army, just right on my chat, Charlie Kirk has been shot. What the fuck? Like, how do you even comprehend that just right there in that moment? And I had a million thoughts all at once, but I wanted to ensure that I was able to really ruminate on them and ensure that I gave a well thought out analysis. All I could say at the time was political violence is dreadful, and live by the sword, die by the sword. That's all I could say at the time. For somebody that said that empathy was fake, I was merely honoring his philosophy.
Because of him. It's because of his words. It's because of the effect he has on these racists that feel emboldened and come to light and then get famous off of their racism. You can be famous for being racist thanks to Elon Musk's platform and Donald Trump making it socially acceptable. If you make it socially acceptable to hate people for the way they were born, you are a garbage person. You are a horrible human being. You are terrible. And as I say that, there is somebody smiling to themselves saying, yeah, I am pretty terrible. Because it is a choice to be hateful. It is harder to be hateful than to be understanding. It is harder. And these people are not happy. They hate their lives, and that's why they spread it on to you. They hate themselves and their lives and situations so much, you need to feel the same hate that they feel. And it is not fair to you, it is not fair to anybody that they have to live in a country where hateful people feel emboldened to publicly be a piece of trash. And now the same state of stress they live in is the same state of stress you live in. The only thing that comes from that is more violence. And they don't seem to understand this. They still don't want gun control. Charlie Kirk said it himself. He said, gun deaths are necessary. I don't care. I still want my Second Amendment right. A 17-year-old grabbed a rifle during BLM with no license and killed 2 people. They glorified him. This is what they want. It's been like 5 years since the George Floyd situation. No one's talking about it except for them. This is what they want. They want hate. They want people to be angry like them. They're angry over something they can't even relate to. They could see a car crash online. They don't care that the other person got hit by another car. But if the person that hit the car was Mexican, they're reposting, sharing. Hey everybody, be scared of Mexicans. Not even truly caring about the incident. Just the narrative.
Jasmine Crockett pointed that out yesterday in Congress. You know, with the whole stabbing of the Ukrainian immigrant. They wanted to be like, that's what you do, is you take one incident, especially if it involves somebody black, and you just paste it everywhere, over and over and over and over and over. But we haven't heard anything about that Colorado school shooting, now have we?
They can spread. Why? They hate themselves. I don't know. I don't know. I've never done it. I've never behaved that way in my life. I couldn't understand it. But if you're hateful, you spread hate. I'm not hateful. I don't spread hate. If you bring hate to me, you will get dealt with accordingly. But I do not go out of my way to hate anybody. And the answer is very simple if we want to get this violence to stop. Impeach Donald Trump. Every single time he is in office, these things start to happen again at a very, very large rate. I mean, the first time he was elected, I remember the KKK came out of hiding. There was torches. It was crazy. They started beating up people on the street. It was insane. Make racists scared again. Shame them. Make them shameful again. I'm tired of normalizing this. I'm not normalizing it, but I'm tired of this being normalized. Call them out in public, or else this violence is going to continue. It's going to continue to increase at alarming rates because people believe there is no consequence for these actions. And maybe that's a whole video for another time. I think I will make another video on this topic. I like this topic. We have a lot in common about how we see it. So what happened to Charlie Kirk shouldn't have happened. But unfortunately, that's the state of the country we are in today. The solution is so simple. But apparently, solutions aren't even wanted. Empathy is not wanted. Gun control is not wanted. Just hate. Just more hate, more fear. Stopping the imaginary violence while increasing the actual violence. I truly believe people are being pushed to their limit. And I truly believe that if you want to save America from this, you need to impeach Donald Trump. Thank you for watching my video. Have a great day. Please make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe.
That's advice from Lewis. That is a great channel. He does some pretty good shorts, pretty funny. But yeah, I mean, what else is there to say? This is a symptom of the environment that's been created. The glorification of violence. I just have to agree with Lewis when there's a certain portion that doesn't want to see us come together because that's what they make money off of. And we need to be more aware of those kind of people. And we need to be more aware of the grift that is being used to cause more division every day on every single line, whether it's race or whether it's sexuality or just in general political belief. I have the idea that we have more in common than things that divide us, because I remember before all this, there would be times where you'd be at parties and somebody would start talking politics and somebody would say, bro, that's not party talk. And everybody could understand that everybody came from different places. Unfortunately, when I got older and realized that a lot of them were closeted racists who just wore the same t-shirts as I did and liked the same bands. When growing up in Christian nationalism, there's a lot of things that I heard that just seemed normal to me. Then when you get out into the real world, you hear people like Charlie Kirk and you realize that there's people that will do and say anything for money, especially if they feel that they've been slighted. Sadly, this is the state of our country right now. So it's more important than anything, I'd say, make sure that you have something to protect yourself. Take advantage of your Second Amendment. Find your people. And if you can, if it's possible, try to find common ground with a conservative who is tired of all this bullshit too. But until then, later, skaters.
Go to skipfranzjr.net for podcasts.
Record player that, I could just spin records all the time.
I run into the bathroom and I'm covered in blood. Like I had put my tooth through my bottom lip.
For music. For gaming and pro-liberty game rants. That's skipfranzjr.net.
In Ukraine or Gaza or anything, beyond that. So
yeah, we were joking earlier. I tend to sniff out to be in the right spot at the right time. So